At the foot of the George Washington Bridge stands today one of the last two remaining shuls practicing the German Ritus in Washington Heights. Its history is rich and provides us with a glimpse of another side of the neighborhood at another time. Congregation Shaarei Hatikvah is the earliest German Jewish institution established in Washington Heights. In the spring of 1935, a group of refugees met for Passover Seder at the Royal Manor Hall on 157th Street. That year, they organized for high holiday services, and in November they formed Kultusgemeinde Shaarei Hatikvah. Shaarei would remain the only German shul in Washington Heights until the middle of 1938. By 1940, the census reported 20,000 German refugees north of 135th Street. There were 10 refugee shuls in Washington Heights by then. Shaarei moved into the upstairs of 4290 Broadway, known to many as the Social Security Building at 183rd Street, until it purchased land and constructed at its current site in 1957. In 1940, Rabbi Shimon Sigmund Adolf Hanover was taken to be the Rav of the shul. His arrival steered the shul in a decidedly orthodox direction, as he brought with him the nusach and legacy of his previous tenure as the last Rav of Wurzburg. As the shul neared completion, Rabbi Hanover asked that something very dear to him be embedded in its wall. A stone from the shul in Wurzburg, and there hangs a tale.
Wurzburg. The city of Wurzburg, which like Frankfurt sits upon the Main, was the seat of the rabbinate for many small municipalities in the surrounding areas. Jews had been living in Wurzburg as far back as the 11th century, though they had been expelled from it at least 3 times. The city was home to such greats as the Or Zarua and the Ra'avon. Under Rabbi Avraham Bing, the community held fast to religious values in the 19th century. Rabbi Bing handed over the rabbinate to Rabbi Seligman Bamberger in 1840, after Rabbi Bamberger showed great fortitude in defending traditional practice before the government. The city was home to a prestigious university and a flourishing Jewish community. Rabbi Bamberger established a yeshiva modeled after the one he attended in Fürth. He also opened a primary and secondary school in 1856. As new laws were applied to the Jewish communities of Lower Franconia and Bavaria in the mid-19th century, the communities that had held a consistent structure since medieval times were now required to have academically trained teachers and rabbis. And so, in 1864, he created the Israelitische Lehrersbildungsanstalt, the famous Teachers' Seminary of Wurzburg, to train teachers for the new generations of German Jewry. Although there were some very liberal Jewish elements in the region, the Rav was able to keep his communities united and elicit concessions from the leaders of the Reform. In promoting this idea in certain instances, he came into conflict with the Hirschtian ideal of Austritt, and there was great strife over the issue. Nevertheless, the Rav's desire to keep his community united bore fruits some 40 years after his passing, when the community elected a new Rav, and even the liberal Reform Jews consented to the appointment of our own Rabbi Sigmund Hanover.
Rabbi Hanover attended school in Wandsbek and continued his studies in Halberstadt, Hamburg, and at the Rabinner Seminar of Berlin. In 1903, he received his doctorate from the University of Jena. From 1906 to 1920, he was the associate rabbi in Köln. Rabbi Hanover held positions as the communal rabbi and district rabbi for Lower Franconia. He also headed the religious studies and language courses for students of the secondary schools and was chairman of the board and a teacher at the famed Wurzburg Seminar. In November 1938, Kristallnacht, Rabbi Dr. Hanover was imprisoned along with hundreds of Jewish men from Wurzburg and sent to the concentration camp in Buchenwald. A month later, in December of 1938, he was released after having given the Gestapo assurances that he would leave Germany within 2 months. Until such time, however, the Gestapo charged him with resuming care of the Jewish community in Wurzburg. Rabbi Hanover and his wife, Ernestina, applied for help wherever possible to leave Germany for England or the United States. The Hanovers sent their little daughter Ruth on a children's transport, and she left Germany for Holland in 1939. Their attempts to obtain immigration visas for her were unsuccessful. In May 1940, Holland was occupied by Germany, and little Ruth was consumed by the war. In February of 1940, the Hanovers took residence in New York. The community of Washington Heights was receiving a rapid influx of German Jewish refugees. It was time to start over.
Rabbi Hanover arrived at these shores from England in 1940. His older daughter had emigrated to Palestine with his stepchildren. Little Ruth was in Holland. The world was in pieces. Correspondence from little Ruth ceased in June of 1941, and in May of 1943 she was deported to Sobibor. Rabbi Hanover had a new pulpit, though some of the faces were familiar. The successor of Rav Seligman and Nathan Bamberger, who had serviced the many hamlets around Wurzburg, would now service a different little hamlet in the midst of the big city, with nothing but the memories and a stone from the synagogue in Wurzburg.
Rabbi Hanover moved to Eretz Yisrael in 1958. It was nifter in the early 1960s.
The short and tragic life of Ruth Hanover was later romanticized in a poem by Israeli poet Yehuda Amichai, her childhood friend.